Hi, everybody. Good morning. How you doing? Standing room only crowd. I like it. I was trying to look up before I start, talking about some of my research, just chatting in general about how we find our way in the world. I was trying to gauge ages in the room. So, anybody in this room younger than 18? I know people don't like to raise their hand. Anybody younger than 18? Right? So maybe we have, maybe almost 20% of the room are younger than 18. How many people maybe 18 to 25? Most of you, 18 to 25. Any old people over 25? Come on. Everybody who's saying no is old as the hills, right? So ultimately, we have a very, very young crowd of people here. And, if you go for generations and you think about Generation A, Z, so on and so forth, I would say that most of you fall in the Generation Z category. A few of you are a little bit older, might be young millennials. But ultimately, this whole "you should change the world" supposedly falls on your shoulders, right? You hear it all the time. You read it all the time. Generation Z is going to come up, change the world, make everything happen. You're going to reverse the problems that consumerism created over the course of the past 200 years. No pressure. No pressure whatsoever. And you're going to do it all while you're learning brand new technologies, and you're adopting new technologies month over month because, Facebook was popular with my students 10 years ago. Now I'm guessing most of you don't use Facebook, but now you're using TikTok, and at some point TikTok will be old-fashioned because this is the nature of the world that we live in, right? So I'd just like to ask you for a minute, just turn to the person next to you, turn to somebody near you, tell them how old you are, and tell them what you expect and want to be doing in 10 years. Just quick. We'll just take a minute. Good. How old are you? And what do you expect to be doing in 10 years from now? Right? Because 16 feels dope, but suddenly 26 is 10 years from now. Time moves fast. Okay. All right. Now, let me ask you another question. How many of you have no idea? How many of you the answer was, I have no idea where I'm going to be in 10 years? I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised. And this ties into the research that I do, right? So let me just start with a story as we get moving through here. Let's see, there we are, right? About 10 years ago, my students used to use Facebook a lot. Do you use Facebook? Nobody uses Facebook anymore, am I right? Again, all the old people raise their hand, right? Because young people don't use Facebook anymore. But most people don't use Facebook, unless you're keeping in touch with your grandmother or keeping in touch with your parents and sharing. Most people aren't using Facebook anymore, right? And so, but 10 years ago, my students used to use Facebook. They used to love using Facebook. And so I used to communicate with them on Facebook Messenger. I used to run my classes in Facebook groups, so on and so forth. They thought I was cool then until they thought I was old-fashioned, right? Because that's how fast things move. And so one night, about 3 months after graduation, in the United States, generally schools graduate, colleges graduate in May. And so it was late August. I'm sitting Sunday night, I'm watching, I don't know if you get The Walking Dead here. Me and my husband were watching The Walking Dead. It's a zombie show, if you don't watch it, Netflix, right? And one message comes up from one of my former students, graduated in May. Hey, any chance that we can talk, have a cup of coffee, have a conversation of some sort? Because, I don't know, I got my first job out of school, but I'm feeling like, is this all there is? Like, there was this big move towards graduation, and now I'm feeling a little bit lost. I was like, sure, of course. I have a good relationship with my students. Happy to chat with you, happy to talk to you. Another message pops up. Same night, same conversation. That night, I heard from 9 former students in the same night Facebook messaging me, and sat there watching The Walking Dead, having the same exact conversation with all of these young people. Some of them had found jobs. They had a job, but they felt like, ugh, you know, this is what I studied, but I'm not quite sure that this is what I want to work at. Others of them actually hadn't found a job yet, so they were still kind of struggling with that transition for themselves. But across the board, what was happening was they were all asking me the same question, like where do I go from here? What's next for me? And can we sit and talk about it? That actually led to what has become more than 12 years of research for me, published papers and book, et cetera, but it's less about those outputs for me. It's actually become my life's work in a lot of ways. This question of, and it really began for me of like, how do people get stuck? Why do they get stuck? And what's happening with bright, talented, highly educated young people when they are stuck, right? Because the old people would tell you, you've got everything going for you, you have all the tools you need, you have a phone in your hand, so you should know all the historical knowledge of all of human history, right? We do that to you, right? Shake your smartphone and say, why don't you know? Because you have the smartphone. And yet, we never said to people, oh, you're standing in the library, in the lobby of a library, so you should know what's in all the books. But somehow, because you have a smartphone, you're supposed to know everything that's on the other end of the smartphone. And I actually think that we do a disservice to young people like you when we set you up to have to change the world with a bunch of new tools that no one has ever had to apply to problem solving, and suddenly, magically, you're going to know how to solve all the problems of the world. And so I began to look at, I don't know why that, my slides are playing with me, so sorry. I began to look at the question of stuckness. Why do people get stuck? How do they get stuck? And how do you find your way when you hit points of transition? And so there's a kind of research that I use that I actually would love more people to do, and it's called action research. And what action research does is it says you learn about a phenomenon by actually trying to improve it. So it's actually a problem-solving orientation in research. So what I got to do is I got to hang out with my students and try to find out why they were stuck by working with them to get them unstuck. And so I didn't even know where to start. That's the beauty of action research. It's not like I'm taking a methodology off the shelf. Two of the young women who had reached out to me on that night, I said, hey, do you want to collaborate with me? We'll put together some kind of an event or a workshop for all of these people who are saying that they're feeling this way. And let's just get together for an afternoon. I'll get coffee, I'll get pizza, and we'll just start talking about how are you feeling? Why are you feeling this lostness? Why are you feeling this way? And I brought them together, and we sat together for that afternoon. My students helped me facilitate it, so I was really a listener. It wasn't, oh, come in and let the professor tell you how to do the future. It was more, I can be a professor that creates some space for you to be thinking about how do you think about the future, right? And what I found was, first of all, we actually don't create that space much at all. We spend a lot of time learning, getting the knowledge in our heads, but we don't spend a tremendous amount of time making sense of it and trying to understand how it applies. So we know, as the beautiful presentation before mine, you know you should be environmentally conscious. You know that you should be a good consumer. You also know that you should be more empathetic, that you should also have a growth mindset, that you should have, if you go through the should do's and should haves of the 21st century, we've all got a long list of ideal ways to be. And yet that question of, and how do I do that? Where do I start? How do I pay my bills while doing it? How do I live a meaningful life while doing it? That doesn't come into the conversation in the same kind of way. And so you may be saying to yourself, wait a second, I thought she was a marketing professor. Why are we talking about the meaning of life and how you live a good life? But the beauty is that in my field of marketing, which is in the service design field, I tied these questions into this question of what services are missing for young people? Where is the service gap that is making young people come out of school and be so unsure about the way to get started? And as I dug deeper, it was really, really interesting, because and now I'm going to ask another question here. How many of you think that you either are or think that you will be married by the time you're 20? Nobody in the room is raising their hand. You thinking you'll be married by 20? He's like, no. Okay, I was saying something else, right? So how many of you think you'll be married by 25? Handful. Handful of people married by 25. How many of people think it'll be about 30 that you'll be married? He's saying second or first time. It seems like 30. We have like a little bit more of it. How many of you think you will never get married? Right? So there's actually a fairly substantial number of people raising their hand for there. This is very typical. We're in Poland right now. That's about the typical distribution, anecdotally, just being able to count from here, of what I have found with people. So suddenly, and this is, my research took me into a part of the literature called emerging adulthood. Because historically, even within, I mean, I know I'm old as the hills, but I'm not that old, right? And when I was coming up, it was people were just starting to get married a little later, and they were still getting married around 25. My parents were married at 18, and they were not considered teen married, right? It was typical for my parents to be married at 18 years old. My mother had 5 kids by the time she was 26, and that was just typical and normal, right? And so we have really moved, and we've got this decade where people are very likely going to be single, or maybe partnered but unmarried, likely not having children. And this is a new liminal space that never existed before, actually in all of human history. And so suddenly you're not only juggling the climate crisis, and you're not only juggling the fact that there's new technology and new ways of being, you're also not only juggling the fact that when I started my career, the average number of years someone spent at a company was 30 years in the company that I started with my first job. And now most of you will move from job to job every 24 to 36 months over the first 10 years of your career. There is a tremendous amount of change, consistent and persistent change that you're going to be dealing with. And our systems have not adapted to it at all. So as a service designer, this for me is fascinating, because I feel like, well, this is where this ties back to business, to economics, to marketing. There are huge, huge gaps in the market to serve the needs of young people coming from 20 to 30 that are not being filled, that A, place a tremendous amount of pressure on you, but B, offer a tremendous amount of opportunity to you if you can move from feeling stuck by it to being curious about it. And of 12 years of research, the most fundamental findings is that we tend to respond to interruptions and disruptions, to these differences, with fear, frustration, rather than curiosity, and that's what leads to our stuckness. So I offer this, you know, it's a lot of words on a slide, but it's a really helpful quotation, right? That it's time to explore the creative potential of interrupted and conflicted lives. You will have interrupted and conflicted lives. And this is, by the way, Mary Catherine Bateson is an anthropologist. And she was writing this, believe it or not, in 1989. So this is also not new. It's just amplified now, right? But this idea that energies, right, this is interrupted and conflicted, right? We, people who came up in the 20th century, really thought that we could plan away interruptions and disruptions. We thought that if we planned things well, we could keep things smooth, and when things were not smooth, when things got dynamic, it typically was a failure of planning. Now, the dynamic environment you're coming up in is that you just have to assume. It is inevitable that you will have multiple interruptions and disruptions. And if that is viewed as a threat or a problem or a failure every time you encounter it, you will wind up being in a threat response very, very frequently. So COVID-19 will not be the last pandemic of your lifetime, likely, as people who are in their teens and early 20s. It will not be the recession that we're in or is coming will not be the last recession that we will be in, right? But interruptions and disruptions can also be positive things, like getting married, like having children, right? So learning, in addition to learning your marketing, your consumer behavior, all of like the content information, one of the fundamental skills of being a successful just human in the 21st century is absolutely learning to be more comfortable, right? People will say, get comfortable being uncomfortable, but they don't really talk about how to do that, right? But ultimately, we will not have stable and settled lives in the 21st century. And the sooner that we accept that and recognize that we have to learn how to deal with dynamism better, we'll constantly be feeling like things aren't going right. Right? But this takes, we used to be able to focus. I'm going to do this job and I'll do it for life. You're going to not only zigzag from job to job, you'll probably zigzag from career to career. And again, that began before. I'm a Gen Xer, right, if we want to play generation games. And I thought that I was brought up to think that if I made the right decision, I'd get into a career and I'd stay in that career. I was a stockbroker. I was in sales. I did public relations and marketing for a number of years, all of this before I became a professor. I have had multiple careers across my life, and I am not unique. This is, again, fundamentally the kind of world that we are in right now. I think some people view that as a challenge. I think it is a huge opportunity. I think that there is so much room and creative potential for doing things that we can't even imagine, but the challenge for you is that you don't have best practices then to follow. You can connect to mentors and so on and so forth, but ultimately, you're needing to learn to pave your own paths. And paving your own path requires a different set of skills than finding a good mentor who's going to tell you which job to have and then follow. So learning how to do that is really important. And this idea of this is not a lack of commitment. I think the older generations, the whole okay boomer thing, comes from the fact that many older people look at the fact that people move from job to job and so on and so forth, and they think, oh, these young people are not committed, they're not loyal, they're not all of this. But they're not zooming out and realizing that when we flattened organizations, it made it that you can't climb the corporate ladder anymore, so you need to leave jobs in order. Any ambitious person needs to move from company to be able to move up. Because a flat organization doesn't give you anywhere to go. Right? So the playing field is different. We're in uncharted territory. Uncharted territory can either feel like, I'm lost in the woods, or uncharted territory can feel like, now I get to explore. Now I get to find my own way. But how do we do that, right? How do we learn to navigate this kind of change and uncertainty rather than be overwhelmed by it? And that's really become, what I want to prompt with showing you this mountain again is climbing this mountain can either be a threat or an invitation. And that's the question. Do you see the uncharted territory as a threat or an invitation? Now, I will tell you for the young people that I work with, many of them see it as a threat. Right? I think we like to make a lot of stereotypes about what young people think and what young people do. But when I sit one-on-one with people and I ask them, many young people I sit with are like, I would love to have a job that was the same company for 20 years. I'd love to have financial stability. I'd love to be able to have some predictability in my life because so much of my life is unpredictable. But the posture is that, oh, dynamic life, and everyone's very comfortable with it. I'm not going to ask you to raise your hands and ask you whether you're comfortable or uncomfortable with a dynamic life. But I will ask you to reflect on it, right? Because if you're comfortable, then you're going to be the leader of tomorrow. If you're uncomfortable, then you have a challenge of getting resourced to get more comfortable, and that's fine. We can really be kind of even-tempered about that. We can really view that as something interesting that we want to go after. So I just offer this little model for you, right? And if you start at the bottom of the model, that interruption or disruption shape is purposefully spiky on one side and smooth on the other. And that's because interruptions and disruptions absolutely come from good and bad things. When you graduate from school, that is an interruption and a disruption to your life. Because when you're in school, you know what the rules are, you know what the expectations are, you've got a true north, I have to get good grades, I have to graduate, I have to do what I do. But then you graduate, and there's an open playing field. Right? So if you're clear on what to do next, if you're sure that the next step is to go off to this job, or you know you want to be a CEO, or you know what to do, then fine. It's not a huge interruption or disruption, you just go about your business. But if you are unclear about what to do next, if you are not sure what is going to happen after graduation, I call that in my work a what now moment. Because what happens is, the feeling of being lost, and if we want to get geeky about it and think about it through the literature lens, it's called disjunction, it's learning disjunction. If anybody wants, I can throw 100 papers at you about learning disjunction if anybody wants to geek out with me, right? But practically, what it is that we hit disjunction, and it's the same as when you're in 6th or 7th grade and you're doing algebra for the first time, and you say, I feel lost, I don't know what to do with this math. Ultimately, we feel lost like that when we hit any kind of a situation. If you've ever heard the term imposter syndrome comes from what now moments. You just get a big promotion and you don't feel like you're qualified for it. You just get a big opportunity and you feel like you're not qualified for it, right? But this notion of a what now moment being something that disrupts who we are and which way we're going and makes us feel lost can throw us into a loop of fear, of frustration, of anger, and it can make us overwhelmed. It can make us feel unsettled, all kinds of feelings, different for different people. Even for some people, they get highly certain. I know exactly what to do, even though they don't. What I'm inviting you to consider is that what now moments do have an antidote, and the antidote is curiosity. And I don't say that lightly. I mean active, applied curiosity. Okay, I don't know what to do can either be highly incendiary, I don't know what to do, or I don't know what to do can invite you into, I wonder what I could do. I wonder what all the opportunities are. And instead of rushing a decision, I've got to make a decision as quickly as possible. Can we open up space for inquiry? I wonder what all the possibilities are. I wonder what all the ways that I could make it through and go through this are. And just that, and there's really ample psychological research to suggest that just the shift from fear to curiosity already is a relief, even if you don't get the answer. Moving from the negative emotion to the positive emotion already influences positively how you will approach, and you will go from kind of binary black and white thinking, which is what happens when we're under threat, into creative thinking. So now you'll have creative solutions to these challenges or whatever that point of inflection is. And so all of this has led me to recognize that what we need to do is we need to learn how to get better at wayfinding and waymaking. These are navigational skills. And this research took me into, I learned, what do people do when they're actually lost in the woods? What do people do when they're actually lost in the wilderness of any sort? And there is aided wayfinding, right? You have a map, you have a compass, you have a true north. And for some of you who said that you know where you want to be in 10 years, you've got that. You know you want to be a CEO. For those of you who don't, unaided wayfinding, we don't actually have a map or a compass. And so it takes a different set of skills to get through the wilderness when you don't have those kind of wayfinding tools. So what happens is you have to make them yourself. You have to develop them yourself. And that will be different for every one of you. So I'm not going to follow up here with the 5 easy steps for you to become a good wayfinder. I'm really imploring you to develop a curiosity for yourself about where are you good at wayfinding right now? Where do you get stuck? Where you're not so good at wayfinding right now? But then receive that as an invitation to learn instead of receiving that as a criticism of yourself, right? You don't have to know everything. The burden of changing the world does not have to be on your back. What the burden can be is for you to find the things that you are interested in and curious about so that it puts energy behind it for you, so that you have a deep desire to learn more and engage the world, not to have social impact because someone tells you the 5 ways to have social impact, but for you to really decide for yourself, where do I want to impact the world? And that can be at the level of your family and your community, or that can be at scale and globally, and anything in between. And so with that, I just offer you 4 kind of quick tips of how to respond when you have one of those what now moments. Regulating your own emotions, and I don't mean go do that. It's not easy to learn how to self-regulate when you wind up in threat. If I got a phone call at the end of this presentation and found out that my husband was leaving me for another woman, I am not going to sit here and tell you that because I've done 12 years of research that it would be easy for me to get that news and I would easily self-regulate. Of course I wouldn't. That would be a what now moment for me. I would have a lot of questions about what to do and how to respond. But if I react based upon those emotions, I will probably make some bad decisions or no decisions at all. So the idea of regulating as a practical matter of opening up an inquiry about what should I do? I wonder what I should and what I can do. Then gather resources. Again, not rushing to judgment. What would be the emotional, the social, the material, and the physical resources that I would need to deal with that what now moment, right? That's what, we don't want to ask for help sometime. And in this model, you are asking for help as a practice. You're always trying to get the resources you would, the same way that you would if you were going to wander in the wilderness. And then take time to reorient. I knew what my life was when I left New York, and I had a husband I've been married to for 26 years. Now I would not know the direction of my life if I now didn't have my husband of 26 years. So reorienting before I respond can be helpful for us to deal with these what now moments and deal with navigating uncertain transitions, which is really the heart of what I'm trying to bring with you. And now, I'm going to wrap up. This is my little pitch for my book, and I do this. I'm a marketer who hates to market, right? So I'm not selling this to you. That is not my purpose. But I did write this book as a field guide. It is not it's based on deep research, but it is actually a lot of tools. Now, for the people in this room, I am not trying to sell you this book, but what I am telling you is that the resources that are in here, many of them are available for free, PDFs, and so on and so forth, and I'm more than happy to share them. I've been teaching here at the university for about 12 years, and I just love working with students here in Poland, so I just want anything that I have learned to be able to be resources for you. So in the Q&A, find me, or find me on LinkedIn or whatever else, and I'll get you free resources. I'm not trying to sell to you. And in the last minute, I just want to leave you with the notion that dispassionate curiosity, right? Curiosity that is not fueled by fear, making sense of periods of time where you have uncertain transitions, and discerning among all of the wide variety of choices that you have at this time. Those are the skills for the 21st century that, in addition to the education that you're getting here, you need to really be focused on. And that's my last word. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time. Nice to meet you all.